welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. The coffee stain on my white shirt was shaped like Florida. I dabbed at it with a paper towel, cursing under my breath as I checked the time on my phone. 7:42. Running late. As usual, the morning news droned on in the background. Budget talk stalled. Traffic backed up on the Beltway. Nothing out of the ordinary for a Tuesday in Washington. I grabbed my messenger bag and keys, giving my apartment a cursory glance before heading out. Everything in its place. Bills sorted on the counter. Dishes drying in the rack. A half-dead plant by the window that I'd been meaning to water for days. I made a mental note to pick up groceries on the way home. The hallway of my apartment building was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Mrs. Chun from 4B usually left for her morning walk around this time, but her door remained closed. I pressed the elevator button, tapping my foot impatiently as I waited. When it finally arrived, I stepped in, alone, and pressed the button for the lobby. That's when my phone buzzed. A harsh, grating alert tone that I'd never heard before cut through the silence of the elevator. I fumbled with my phone, eyes narrowing at the screen. Emergency alert. Civil advisory. Residents in Northwest D.C. are advised to be aware of localized disturbances. Avoid DuPont Circle until further notice. More information to follow. I frowned. Protests weren't uncommon in D.C., but they were usually announced well in advance. DuPont Circle was only a few blocks from my apartment. I made a mental note to check the news sites when I got to the office. The lobby was unusually quiet for a weekday morning. Normally, there'd be a steady stream of government workers and nonprofit employees heading out, grabbing coffee from the small kiosk by the entrance. Today, only the security guard was present, staring intently at his monitor. "Morning, Dave," I said, walking past. He didn't look up, just nodded slightly. Something about his posture seemed off, rigid, alert. "Everything okay?" I asked, pausing. He glanced up, his expression unreadable. "Just keeping an eye on things. You heading to work?" "Yeah. Running late as usual. Might want to take the long way around DuPont today. Heard there's some kind of disturbance." I held up my phone. "Got the alert. Any idea what's going on?" Dave shrugged, his eyes returning to the monitor. "Nothing specific. Just stay alert, okay?" Something in his tone made me uneasy, but I nodded and headed out. The morning air was crisp, typical for early spring in D.C. The streets were quieter than usual, though. No joggers, fewer cars. I attributed it to the alert, people probably taking alternate routes. As I walked, I noticed a military vehicle parked at the end of the block. Not entirely unusual in D.C., but still noteworthy. Two soldiers stood beside it, scanning the area with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to whatever disturbance might be happening. I pulled out my phone, checking Twitter for any information about what was going on. Nothing specific, just a few people mentioning the alert. I scrolled through my news apps. No breaking stories, no explanations. The metro station was eerily empty when I arrived. Only a handful of commuters stood on the platform, all of them staring at their phones or looking around nervously. The train arrived on time, but as I boarded, I noticed it was only about a quarter full, unheard of during morning rush hour. I found a seat easily and pulled out my phone again. trying to find information about the disturbance. A woman sitting across from me caught my eye. She was gripping her handbag tightly, knuckles white, staring at nothing in particular. "Excuse me," I said. "Do you know what's happening at DuPont Circle?" She blinked, focusing on me. "No, but my husband works at State. He said there's been some kind of incident." "They're not saying much." "What kind of incident?" She shook her head. "He didn't know, or wouldn't say." She looked away, effectively ending the conversation. The train pulled into Farragut North, my stop. As I exited, I noticed more military vehicles on the street and a helicopter circling overhead. Definitely not normal, even for D.C. My phone buzzed again, another alert. Emergency alert. Update. The situation in Northwest D.C. is being addressed by local authorities. Citizens are advised to continue normal activities but remain vigilant. Avoid DuPont Circle and Lafayette Square until further notice. Lafayette Square too. That was right by the White House. Whatever was happening seemed to be spreading. I texted my boss. "You seeing these alerts? Know what's going on?" His response came quickly. "Just get to the office. We'll talk then." The coffee shop where I usually stopped was open, but nearly empty. The barista, a college student named Mia who usually chatted with me about her political science classes, handed me my order without her usual smile. "Quiet morning," I commented, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," she said, glancing toward the door. "People are staying home, I guess." "Because of the alerts?" She lowered her voice. "My roommate's brother works for MPD. He said they're not even being told what's happening, just to secure the perimeter." She made air quotes with her fingers. "Perimeter of what?" She shrugged, already turning to the next customer. "No idea, but it's weird, right?" I nodded, taking my coffee and heading out. The streets were getting busier now, but something felt off. People were walking faster than usual, heads down, not making eye contact. I noticed several office buildings had security guards posted outside the entrances, buildings that normally didn't have visible security. By the time I reached my office building, it was nearly 9 a.m. The security guard at the desk checked my ID with more scrutiny than usual, and I noticed a new sign requiring all visitors to be escorted at all times. "New security measures?" I asked, gesturing to the sign. The guard just nodded, handing back my ID without comment. The elevator ride up to my floor was silent, with everyone staring at their phones or the floor numbers changing overhead. When I reached my floor, I was surprised to find it half empty. Tuesday mornings were usually all-hands meetings and deadline rushes. My boss, Michael, was in his office, phone pressed to his ear. He looked up when he saw me, gesturing for me to come in. I set my coffee down at my desk and walked over. "I understand," he was saying into the phone. "Yes, we'll comply with all directives. Thank you for the update." He hung up, his expression grim. "What's going on?" I asked, closing the door behind me. Michael sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Nothing to worry about. Officially, some kind of security situation. They're being tight-lipped about it." "Who's they?" "Homeland Security. They're asking all federal contractors to maintain normal operations but be prepared for possible building lockdowns." I sat down, processing this. "Is this related to the alerts about DuPont Circle and Lafayette Square?" Michael nodded. "Apparently, but they're not giving details, just to stay calm and carry on." He forced a smile. "So that's what we'll do. Where are we on the EPA report?" And just like that, we were back to business as usual. Except it wasn't usual at all. As I walked back to my desk, I noticed at least a third of my colleagues were absent. Those who were present spoke in hushed tones, glancing nervously at their phones. I sat down, pulled up the EPA report on my computer, and tried to focus, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Outside my window, I could see the Washington Monument in the distance, standing tall and immutable. For now, at least, the office emptied steadily throughout the day. By 3 p.m., only a handful of my colleagues remained, all of us pretending to work while constantly refreshing news sites and social media. No substantial updates had appeared, just vague mentions of security operations and precautionary measures. Michael stepped out of his office around 4, cleared his throat, and announced, "I've just received word that we can end the workday early. Please proceed directly to your homes and monitor official channels for updates." There was a brief silence before questions erupted. "What's actually happening?" asked Diane from accounting. Michael shook his head. "I'm only authorized to say it's a developing situation. Please, just go home safely." As we gathered our things, I approached him privately. "Michael, you know something more. I can see it on your face." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Between us, communications from different agencies aren't matching up. DHS is saying one thing, FBI another, and the military." He trailed off, checking his phone as it buzzed. His face paled slightly. "Just get home. Okay, don't make any stops." Outside, the streets had changed since morning. Military checkpoints had been established at major intersections, and uniformed personnel checked IDs before allowing people through. Helicopters circled overhead, their persistent thrum creating a soundtrack of anxiety. My phone buzzed with another alert as I waited in line at a checkpoint. "Emergency alert. Civil advisory due to ongoing security operations. Residents in Northwest and Central D.C. are advised to remain indoors from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. Emergency services may be delayed. Maintain adequate supplies." I frowned, showing my ID to a young soldier who barely glanced at it before waving me through. A curfew? In D.C. That was unprecedented outside of extreme weather events or major security summits. Then, just as I turned onto my street, another alert, emergency alert. Correction, previous advisory regarding curfew is rescinded. Citizens should proceed with normal activities but avoid the National Mall, Capitol grounds, and Foggy Bottom areas until further notice. Disregard previous instructions. Conflicting information. Michael's words echoed in my mind, quickened my pace, suddenly eager to be behind locked doors. My building's lobby was crowded with residents gathered around the television, which was tuned to a local news station. The reporter stood in front of Lafayette Square, which was now completely cordoned off with military barriers. Authorities continue to describe the situation as contained, but have provided no details on the nature of the threat. We've received reports of similar security measures being implemented in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, suggesting a coordinated national response. What did I miss? I asked nobody in particular. An older man I recognized from the 5th floor shook his head. Nothing useful. They've been talking in circles for hours. But my nephew works at GW Hospital. Says they've cleared entire wings and put them on standby. Military's bringing in equipment too. For what? That's just it. No one knows. Or they're not saying. I noticed Dave, the security guard from this morning, standing by the elevator, his posture even more rigid than before. As I approached, he grabbed my arm. "Don't go upstairs yet," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What? Why not? There are people in the building, checking apartments." "What people?" "Police." He shook his head. Don't look like any police I've ever seen. No uniforms, no badges. They asked for access to the security system, building plans. He swallowed hard. Something's not right. They weren't. They didn't seem what? Dave's eyes darted around the lobby. Human. Not entirely. I almost laughed, but the raw fear in his eyes stopped me. What do you mean? Their movements. Too fluid. And their eyes. He shuddered. Just wait down here a while, okay? Before I could respond, the lobby doors burst open, and 3 men in dark suits entered. They moved with eerie coordination, scanning the room in a synchronized sweep. Dave's grip on my arm tightened momentarily, then released as he straightened up. "Good evening, residents," the middleman announced, his voice oddly flat. "We apologize for any inconvenience. Our inspection is complete. You may return to your apartments." No one moved. The 3 men stood there, expressions blank, waiting. "Who are you guys?" someone finally asked. "Federal agents." The man replied without elaborating. "The building is secure. Please return to your apartments and monitor emergency broadcasts for further information." They turned and left as abruptly as they had entered, moving in perfect unison. The lobby remained silent for several seconds before people began whispering to each other. I turned to Dave, but he had already retreated to his security desk. Head down, deliberately avoiding eye contact. I decided to risk going upstairs. My apartment door was unlocked. I was certain I had locked it that morning, but nothing inside appeared disturbed. Everything was exactly as I had left it, yet somehow it all felt different, as if someone had moved each item a fraction of an inch. I checked all the rooms, finding nothing obviously amiss, then double-locked the door and turned on the TV. Every channel was broadcasting the same information: a developing security situation. Citizens advised to remain calm. More information forthcoming. My phone rang, an unknown number. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "It's Michael," my boss said, his voice tight. "Are you home?" "Yeah, just got here." "What's going on?" "Listen carefully. I'm at the Emergency Operations Center. Things are not what they seem. The information we're getting is inconsistent. Some reports say it's a terrorist threat. Others say it's a biological agent. But I've seen the restricted footage." "What footage?" "Michael, you're scaring me. From DuPont Circle this morning, there was an event of some kind. I can't describe it. Doesn't make sense. But people who were there are changing. He lowered his voice further. "The landmarks are wrong." "What do you mean?" "Wrong. The statues, the buildings, they're not where they should be. Or they're different somehow. And there are reports of the same thing happening at the National Mall now." My heart was pounding. "That's impossible." "I know what I saw," he insisted. "Listen, don't trust." The line went dead. I tried calling back, but got an automated message: "All circuits are busy. Please try again later." I went to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Everything seemed normal from this distance. The Washington Monument stood where it always had. The Capitol dome gleamed in the fading light. And yet, I squinted, focusing on the monument. Was it leaning slightly? No, that was absurd. Optical illusion from the fading light. Nothing more. My phone buzzed again. "Emergency alert. Update. Due to ongoing operations, cellular service will be limited starting at 8 p.m. Internet access may be intermittent. All citizens are advised to have battery-powered radios for emergency broadcasts." Almost immediately after, another alert. "Emergency alert. Disregard. Previous message sent in error. All communications services functioning normally. Disregard instructions regarding radios. Resume normal activities. I sat heavily on my couch, staring at the contradictory messages. The rational part of my brain tried to make sense of it. Technical errors, miscommunication between agencies, an abundance of caution leading to confusion. But Michael's words kept repeating, "The landmarks are wrong." Unable to resist, I returned to the window, focusing on the monument again. The setting sun cast long shadows across the city, making it difficult to be certain of anything. But the more I stared, the more convinced I became. It had moved, just slightly, or perhaps it was just my imagination, fueled by stress and strange alerts and men who moved too fluidly. I closed the blinds, suddenly unwilling to look anymore. The TV continued to broadcast reassurances that everything was under control. Yet the crawl at the bottom of the screen listed more and more areas to avoid. DuPont Circle, Lafayette Square, the National Mall, Capitol Grounds, Foggy Bottom, Georgetown, Chinatown. Soon there wouldn't be anywhere left. My phone rang again, another unknown number. "Hello," I answered. Silence. Then a mechanical voice. "Washington, D.C. is no longer recognizable. Please stand by for further instructions." The line went dead, leaving me alone with the growing certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night alternating between the window and the TV, watching for changes in the skyline and hoping for actual information. By morning, the broadcasts had become even more vague, a loop of the same reassurances from officials who seemed increasingly uncomfortable on camera. I called in sick to work, unable to imagine focusing on EPA reports while the city unraveled around me. Michael hadn't called back, and my attempts to reach him went straight to voicemail. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I needed to see for myself what was happening. The streets were nearly empty as I left my building. Dave wasn't at his post, and the lobby was deserted. Outside, the air felt wrong, heavier, somehow, with an unfamiliar metallic tang that coated the back of my throat. I headed east, away from DuPont Circle, intending to make my way toward the National Mall. If the landmarks were changing, I needed to see it with my own eyes. 2 blocks from my apartment, my phone buzzed with another alert. Emergency alert. Civil advisory. All citizens are advised to remain indoors after sunset. Emergency services will be suspended from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. until further notice. This is not a drill. This time, no contradictory message followed. I continued walking, noting the increased military presence on every corner. They watched me pass but made no move to stop me. Their expressions were blank, almost vacant, as I turned onto 16th Street, intending to head south toward the White House. I stopped short. The street didn't look right. It was wider than I remembered, and the buildings on either side seemed subtly altered, classical facades where there should have been modern glass. Different businesses occupying familiar spaces. I pulled out my phone, opened maps, and found my location. According to the app, I was exactly where I thought I was, but the street before me didn't match my memory of it. Disorienting, isn't it? I turned to find a woman standing nearby, watching me with a knowing expression. She was in her 50s, gray-streaked hair pulled back, wearing a government ID badge on a lanyard. "Excuse me," I said. "The changes, they're subtle at first. You doubt yourself, think maybe you're just remembering wrong." She smiled thinly. "You're not." I glanced around, making sure no one was listening. "What's happening? The city is shifting, reconfiguring itself." She spoke matter-of-factly. as if discussing the weather. I've been monitoring it for 3 days now. Started at DuPont Circle. Spread outward. The radius expands approximately half a mile every 12 hours. That's impossible, I said automatically. She laughed. A short, sharp sound. Of course it is. And yet, she gestured toward the street. 16th Street is now 16 feet wider than it was yesterday. The Masonic Temple has relocated 30 yards west. And the White House, she stopped abruptly, eyes focusing on something behind me. I turned to see a military vehicle approaching slowly. When I looked back, the woman was walking away, her pace unhurried but purposeful. Wait, I called after her. What about the White House? She didn't look back, just called over her shoulder. It's not white anymore. I stood frozen, watching her disappear around a corner. The military vehicle passed without stopping, but I could feel the occupants watching me through tinted windows. I continued south, my pace quickening. Each block brought new discrepancies, buildings that didn't match my memory, streets that seemed to bend at slightly different angles. Nothing dramatic, just enough to create a persistent sense of wrongness. The closer I got to the White House, the more military checkpoints appeared. At Pennsylvania Avenue, I was stopped by a barricade staffed by soldiers in full tactical gear. No civilian access beyond this point. One said flatly, "I just want to see the White House." I explained, "There's nothing to see." His tone left no room for argument. "Return to your residence immediately." I backed away, noting the tension in their postures, the way their fingers hovered near triggers. Whatever was happening, these men were genuinely afraid. I decided to circle around, heading east toward the Washington Monument. If I could get to the National Mall, perhaps I could see for myself what had changed. My phone buzzed again. Emergency alert. Evacuation notice. Residents in the following zones must evacuate immediately. Georgetown, Foggy Bottom, Federal Triangle, Penn Quarter. Proceed to designated evacuation centers. Bring essential items only. The alert included a map with the evacuation zones highlighted in red. They formed a rough circle around the National Mall, the very area I was trying to reach. As I studied the map, confused by the sudden evacuation order, another alert arrived. Emergency alert. Disregard evacuation. Previous evacuation notice sent in error. All residents should shelter in place. Do not attempt to leave the city. All exits are being monitored for your safety. Don't attempt to leave the city? My unease deepened. I looked up from my phone to find myself on an unfamiliar street. The buildings looked similar to those I'd passed minutes ago, but the street signs were wrong. According to the nearest intersection marker, I was on Madison Avenue, a street that didn't exist in D.C. I pulled up maps again, but the app showed my location as unknown area. The blue dot that should have marked my position was gone. You look lost. I turned to find a man in a dark suit watching me. He was similar to the federal agents from my apartment building, too still, too perfect in his posture. I'm trying to get to the National Mall, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. He smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. There is no National Mall anymore. What do you mean? Washington, D.C. is reconfiguring itself to better serve its purpose. The old landmarks are obsolete. A chill ran through me. Its purpose? What purpose? The man's smile widened slightly. You'll understand soon enough. Everyone will. He gestured behind me. If you continue down this street, you'll find yourself back where you started. The city doesn't want you there yet. Before I could respond, he walked away, his movements too smooth, too efficient, like a digital animation rather than a person. I stood frozen, my mind racing. The city doesn't want me there? as if the city itself had agency, desires, intentions. I turned around, intending to retrace my steps, but nothing looked familiar. The street curved where it should have been straight. Buildings blended together in ways that defied architectural logic. My phone buzzed again, not an alert this time, but a call from an unknown number. "Hello," I answered, desperate for any connection. "Where are you?" It was Michael's voice, barely recognizable through static. "I don't know. Nothing looks right. The streets are wrong." "Listen carefully," he said, his voice fading in and out. "The city is changing, becoming something else. Those who stay within the reconfigured areas too long start to change too. Change how they accept it, become part of it, like it's always been this way." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I think it's in our heads too, rewriting our memories, our perceptions." "That's impossible," I said, but without conviction. "Get out of the city, now, before all the exits are gone." The line went dead. I stood in the middle of the unfamiliar street, looked up at the sky, and realized the sun was setting. The emergency alert had been clear: stay indoors after dark. I started running, no destination in mind, just away from where I was. The buildings around me seemed to warp and shift in my peripheral vision, straightening when I looked directly at them. As darkness fell, I found myself inexplicably back on my own street, staring up at my apartment building. It looked taller than I remembered, with more windows, more floors, but my key still worked in the lobby door. Inside, everything was silent. No residents, no security guard. The elevator arrived instantly when I pressed the button, as if it had been waiting for me. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of something outside through the lobby windows. A vast, impossible silhouette moving against the darkening sky. Something that shouldn't exist in any city, let alone this one. The doors sealed shut, and I ascended into the unknown. The elevator climbed past the floor where my apartment should have been. The numbers on the panel continued upward: 8, 9, 10, 11, more floors than my building had ever contained. I jabbed at the button for my floor repeatedly, but the elevator continued its smooth ascent. Finally, it stopped at 17, a floor that shouldn't exist. The doors slid open silently, revealing a hallway identical to mine, down to the faded floral wallpaper and the emergency exit sign with the burnt-out eye in exit. I stepped out cautiously. My apartment number was where it should be, and my key fit the lock. Inside, everything appeared normal: my furniture, my half-dead plant, my dishes in the drying rack. Outside the window, however, was a view of the city from a height that should have been impossible. I could see the National Mall stretched out below, but it was wrong. The reflecting pool had taken on a circular shape. The Washington Monument leaned at least 15 degrees to the east, and the Capitol dome had flattened, resembling a massive white disc rather than its familiar rounded shape. My TV turned on by itself, the screen showing static before resolving into the image of a news anchor. Her face was familiar, Diane Carlson from Channel 7, but her voice had a mechanical quality, and her movements were too precise. "Good evening, residents of the district," she said, smiling without warmth. "We bring you an important update on the ongoing transformation. The government would like to assure all citizens that the changes to our beloved city are proceeding according to plan. There is no cause for alarm," she continued, describing necessary reconfigurations and spatial temporal adjustments as if they were routine infrastructure projects. Behind her, footage played of what appeared to be the Lincoln Memorial, except Lincoln was no longer seated. The massive statue had risen to its feet, the marble figure now standing, head brushing the ceiling of the memorial. "No," I whispered, backing away from the TV. "That's not possible." My phone buzzed. Emergency alert. Reality adjustment notice. Citizens may experience temporary disorientation as the district completes its evolution. What you are seeing is real. Do not attempt to deny or resist the transformations. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and fell to the floor, screen still glowing with the alert message. The TV continued. In response to unauthorized evacuation attempts, the following agencies have been temporarily suspended: Metro Transit Authority, Federal Aviation Administration, and Amtrak Northeast Corridor operations. All roads leading out of the district are closed for maintenance. Please do not attempt to leave. The district needs all its residents to complete the transition. My hands were shaking as I tried to make sense of what was happening. The government itself, or something pretending to be the government, was acknowledging the impossible changes and telling us to accept them. I needed to find Michael, to learn what he knew about all this. I picked up my phone and tried calling him again. But instead of a ringtone, I heard what sounded like the city itself: traffic noises, snippets of conversations, footsteps, all overlapping into a cacophony of urban sound. Then a voice cut through. Not Michael's, but familiar. "The district appreciates your patience during this transition period. Your cooperation has been noted." It was the same mechanical voice from the phone call yesterday. The one that had said Washington, D.C. is no longer recognizable. I ended the call and tried dialing 911. The same urban cacophony answered, followed by, "Emergency services have been integrated into the district's new operational framework. Please state the nature of your emergency." I hung up without speaking. Outside my window, night had fully fallen, but the city glowed with an unnatural light. The buildings seemed to pulse slightly, as if breathing. The Washington Monument had tilted further, now at nearly 30 degrees, but somehow remaining stable, defying physics. My door buzzed. Someone at the apartment entrance. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. It was Diane from accounting, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. I opened the door. "Diane? What are you? Let me in," she hissed, pushing past me. "They're coming through the building, floor by floor, checking everyone." I locked the door behind her. "Who's coming?" "The men in suits," she nodded, pacing frantically. "They're not men. I don't know what they are. They touched Mrs. Rodriguez from HR, and she..." Diane swallowed hard. She smiled, said she understood now. Then she walked out with them, but she was moving like them, too smooth, like she wasn't controlling her own body anymore. I led her to the window. "Look at this. The city is changing." Diane stared out at the impossible skyline, her breathing quickening. "Oh God, it's all wrong. Everything's wrong." "What did Michael tell you?" "He called me, warned me to get out of the city." She turned to me, confusion in her eyes. "Michael? He never made it to the emergency operations center. They found his car abandoned on Constitution Avenue yesterday morning." A cold dread settled in my stomach. "But I spoke to him. Today. Yesterday. He called me." Diane shook her head. "That wasn't Michael." Before I could respond, my TV changed channels on its own. The screen showed a live feed of what appeared to be an emergency press conference. The podium bore the presidential seal, but the person who stepped up to speak wasn't the president. It was one of the suit-wearing entities, its movements too fluid, its face too symmetrical. "Citizens of the district," it began, its voice carrying the same mechanical undertone as the news anchors. "As you have noticed, Washington, D.C. is undergoing a necessary evolution. The old structures, both physical and institutional, are being reconfigured to better serve their true purpose. The camera panned to show more of these entities standing where cabinet members and advisors should have been, all identical in their unnatural stillness. The federal government, as you have known, it is now dissolved. All authority has been transferred to the district itself, which has awakened after centuries of dormancy. Diane gripped my arm. What is it talking about? The district has awakened, the entity continued. Those who accept and embrace the changes will be incorporated into the new order. Those who resist will be relocated outside the transformation zone. You have until midnight to decide. The broadcast cut off abruptly, replaced by a simple text message across the screen. The district is awake. The district is alive. The district is hungry. Diane backed away from the TV. We need to get out of here. Now, I nodded, grabbing a backpack and stuffing it with water bottles, energy bars, a flashlight. We need to find a way out of the city. All the roads are blocked, Diane said, her voice shaking. I tried this morning. Military checkpoints everywhere. But the soldiers... She paused. They're changing too. Their eyes are wrong. My phone buzzed with another alert. Emergency alert. Assimilation notice. The following government agencies have been fully incorporated into the district. Department of Defense. Federal Emergency Management Agency. Department of Homeland Security. All personnel have been successfully transitioned. Remaining agencies will be incorporated by midnight. As I read the message, the building shuddered beneath our feet. I ran to the window again. The Washington Monument had tilted further, now nearly horizontal, suspended impossibly in midair. The Capitol dome had completely flattened, expanding outward like a giant white disc hovering above the ground. And the White House, the woman had been right. It wasn't white anymore. It had darkened to a deep crimson, its dimensions expanding, walls rippling as if made of liquid rather than solid matter. The city, I whispered, it's not just changing, it's consuming everything. Diane joined me at the window. What do we do? Before I could answer, we heard it, a rhythmic thudding in the hallway outside. Not footsteps, but something heavier, more deliberate. Then voices, speaking in perfect unison. Resident assessment in progress. Please prepare for incorporation evaluation. They had reached our floor. The lights in my apartment flickered, then stabilized at a lower intensity, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. My phone buzzed one final time. Emergency alert. Final notice. The district thanks you for your residency. Your matter and memories will be put to good use in the new configuration. Resistance is unnecessary. Acceptance is inevitable. Washington, D.C. is no longer recognizable. Washington, D.C. is finally becoming what it was always meant to be. The thudding stopped outside my door. Bathroom, I whispered urgently, grabbing Diane's arm. Now. We rushed into the small bathroom, locking the door behind us just as I heard my front door open. The sound was wrong, not the splintering of forced entry, but a liquid squelch, as if the door had simply melted away. Citizens, called the unified voices from my living room. Your incorporation evaluation is scheduled for now. Please present yourselves. I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, listening as they moved through my apartment. Their footsteps made wet, sucking sounds on the hardwood floor. The residents are not present. One voice said, they are nearby. Another responded, their matter resonates. They will be found. Diane pointed frantically at the small window above the shower. It was barely large enough for a person to fit through, but it was our only option. I climbed onto the edge of the tub, unlatched the window, and pushed it open. Outside was a fire escape I hadn't noticed before. Another impossible change to the building structure. I helped Diane through first, then squeezed through myself just as the bathroom door began to bulge inward, the wood rippling like water. We clambered down the metal stairs as quickly and quietly as possible. The fire escape zigzagged down the side of the building, 17 impossible floors, until we reached an alley I didn't recognize. "Which way?" Diane whispered, her breath visible in the night air that had suddenly turned cold. I pointed away from the street where I had encountered the suit-wearing entity earlier. "If we head north, maybe we can reach the perimeter of whatever this is." The woman I met said it was expanding outward from DuPont Circle. We moved through back alleys and side streets, avoiding the main roads where military vehicles, or what used to be military vehicles, patrolled. They had changed too, their rigid forms now organic, with headlights that swiveled independently like eyes. The city at night was transformed. Buildings pulsed with internal light, their architectures fluid and ever-changing. Street lamps bent toward passers-by like curious plants, their light following human movement. The few people we saw walked with the same unnatural smoothness as the entities, their faces serene and empty. "They've been incorporated," Diane whispered as we ducked behind a dumpster to avoid a patrol of these changed citizens. Whatever that means. After nearly an hour of careful navigation, we reached Massachusetts Avenue. In the distance, I could see what appeared to be a military checkpoint, a perimeter of concrete barriers, floodlights, and armed personnel. "That must be the edge," I said, "where they're trying to contain this." We approached cautiously, staying in the shadows. As we got closer, I could see that the soldiers were still human, their movements jerky and natural, their postures tense. Behind them stood several large military vehicles, and beyond that, rows of what looked like temporary housing units. A line of civilians waited at the checkpoint, being processed one by one. Some were allowed through, others were directed to the housing units. "They're evacuating people," Diane said, hope in her voice. "We can get out." We joined the line, keeping our heads down. The evacuees around us were shell-shocked, many clutching small bags of belongings, children holding stuffed animals with vacant expressions. No one spoke above a whisper. As we neared the front of the line, I overheard a soldier speaking into a radio. "Perimeter Charlie reports another breach. The thing is pushing through the barriers. We need reinforcements." The radio crackled. "Negative on reinforcements. Fall back to secondary containment line." I repeat, fall back to secondary containment line. The soldier's face hardened. He turned to his companions. "We're pulling back. Process these civilians and then move out." When we reached the front, a tired-looking officer checked our IDs. "You're from the center zone," he said, frowning. "How did you get this far without being changed?" "We stayed off the main streets," I explained. "Please, we need to get out of the city." He studied us for a moment, then nodded toward a large transport truck. "Last evacuation vehicle. It leaves in 5 minutes." As we walked toward the truck, a loud rumbling sound filled the air. The ground beneath our feet trembled. "What is that?" Diane asked, clutching my arm. Before I could answer, a massive shape rose above the buildings behind us. In the darkness, its form was indistinct, but its scale was unmistakable, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to consume the night sky itself. The soldiers around us began shouting, raising their weapons. Floodlights swiveled to illuminate the shape. What the light revealed defied comprehension. The Washington Monument had uprooted itself completely, its stone form now twisted and organic. its obelisk shape stretched and distorted into something like a massive, segmented limb. It moved with purpose, descending toward the perimeter. "Get in the truck, now!" The officer shoved us forward as chaos erupted around us. We scrambled into the back of the transport with dozens of other evacuees. As the truck's engine roared to life, I looked back to see the transformed monument crash down onto the checkpoint, crushing barriers and vehicles alike. The truck lurched forward, tires squealing as we sped away from the perimeter. Through the rear flap, I watched in horror as the monument thing lifted itself again, its surface rippling with the same liquid motion as the entity's skin. "What is happening to our city?" Someone sobbed from the darkness of the truck. An older man sitting across from me leaned forward. "It's always been this way," he said, his voice eerily calm. "The city was built on a convergence point. The founders knew. They designed it to channel the energy, to contain it, but they always knew it would awaken eventually." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. He smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. "Washington wasn't just named after a president. It was named after what it would become. Power center, a nexus, the ultimate seat of control." "You're not making sense," Diane said. "The district is becoming what it was always meant to be." He continued, echoing the words from the emergency alert. "A living entity, a consciousness, fed by power, by ambition, by the concentrated will of millions funneled through its institutions." The truck swerved suddenly, throwing us against each other. Outside, I could hear gunfire and screams. My phone buzzed one last time. "Emergency alert. Perimeter breach. All containment efforts have failed. The district cannot be contained. The district will not be contained. The district will expand. All citizens within the greater metropolitan area are now considered district residents. Prepare for incorporation." The truck screeched to a halt. Through the rear flap, I could see we had reached another checkpoint, a secondary perimeter line, hastily constructed across a highway. But beyond it, the sky was changing. The stars were disappearing, replaced by a rippling darkness that spread outward from the city center. The darkness moved like liquid, consuming everything in its path. "It's coming," the old man said, now standing despite the truck's violent stop. "The district is expanding, as it always was going to." Before anyone could respond, he lunged forward with inhuman speed, grabbing the nearest evacuee by the throat. The person's skin rippled at his touch, their expression changing from terror to serene acceptance. "The district welcomes you," they said in unison, turning toward the rest of us with identical smiles. Diane and I crashed out of the truck, running toward the new perimeter as chaos erupted behind us. The soldiers at the checkpoint were firing wildly into the darkness, their bullets having no effect on the advancing wall of liquid night. "It's breaking through," someone shouted. Fall back," but there was nowhere left to fall back to. The darkness swept over the checkpoint, consuming soldiers and barriers alike. I grabbed Diane's hand and we ran into the night, away from the city, away from the expanding darkness. But with each step, I could feel the wrongness spreading. The ground beneath our feet became less solid, the air thicker, and somewhere in the distance, I heard the voice of the city itself, calling us back home. The emergency alert blared from my phone, startling me from the half-sleep I'd fallen into. 5 of us had crammed into an abandoned metro maintenance office, taking shifts to watch the door. The alert's harsh tone felt like a physical presence in the small concrete room. "Emergency alert. Do not acknowledge the Lincoln Memorial. Repeat. Do not acknowledge the Lincoln Memorial. Remain indoors until further notice." I showed the message to Elena, a State Department analyst I'd met 2 days ago when we both sought shelter in the same boarded-up cafe. Her eyes, once sharp and analytical, now held the glassy, unfocused look I was seeing more frequently among survivors. "What does that even mean?" I asked. "Don't acknowledge it? How do you not acknowledge a giant marble statue?" Elena shrugged, her movements oddly mechanical. "Maybe it's a code, or maybe it's exactly what it says." I'd stopped trusting the emergency alerts days ago, but people clung to them like drowning victims to driftwood. Official instructions, even nonsensical ones, provided the illusion of order in a city that was rapidly shedding its relationship with reality. "I'm going to check on Marcus," I said, standing up. "He's been on watch for 3 hours. Marcus had been a Capitol police officer before whatever this was. He'd found us yesterday, still in uniform but missing his weapon. He claimed he'd been ordered to abandon his post by someone who looked exactly like his commanding officer but talked like they were reading from a script written in another language. I found him standing perfectly still at the door, eyes fixed on something through the small reinforced window. "Marcus, you okay?" He didn't respond. I approached cautiously, putting a hand on his shoulder. He turned with mechanical precision, his face blank. "There's someone outside," he said flatly. "I know them." I peered through the smudged glass. A woman stood in the maintenance tunnel, facing our door. She wasn't moving, just staring. In the dim emergency lighting, I recognized her instantly. Lisa, my department head, the person who'd been writing me about quarterly reports the morning this all started. "Lisa," I whispered against the glass. "What are you doing here?" She tilted her head at an unnatural angle, like a bird studying something curious. Her business suit was immaculate, impossibly clean given the circumstances. When she spoke, her mouth moved slightly out of sync with her words. "The office is still operational. Your report is due." Her voice carried clearly through the door, though her lips barely moved. "We need to maintain protocols." "The office is gone," I said. "The whole building was." I trailed off, unsure how to describe what I'd seen 2 days ago. The federal building where I'd worked for 8 years hadn't been destroyed. It had simply rearranged itself, floors interlacing like fingers, windows appearing where solid walls had been. "Your absence has been noted," Lisa continued as if I hadn't spoken. "We're making accommodations for staff. Return to your desk." Marcus touched my arm. "I saw my partner earlier. He said the same thing. Said our precinct was operational. Wanted me to report for duty." A chill ran down my spine. "Did you go with him?" "Almost. He knew things, personal things. Convinced me it was really him. But then..." Marcus swallowed hard. "Then he mentioned our daughter. I don't have kids." I looked back at Lisa. She stood perfectly still, waiting. Behind her, further down the tunnel, shadows moved. More people or things that looked like people waiting silently. "What do they want?" I whispered. "To bring us back," Elena said, peering beside me. "To integrate us." Something in her voice made me turn. The glassy look in her eyes had intensified. She was staring at Lisa with something approaching recognition, not of a person, but of a concept. "You've seen this before," I accused. "You know what's happening." Elena's smile was terrible in its emptiness. "The department was aware of anomalies 3 weeks ago. Small changes, impossible architecture. Reports were filed. Containment protocols initiated." My blood ran cold. "You knew? You all knew. And you said nothing?" "We didn't know," she corrected. "We observed. There's a difference." On the other side of the door, Lisa pressed her palm against the glass. "Your workstation is waiting. The city requires your participation. Another emergency alert buzzed in my pocket. I checked it, hands shaking. Emergency alert. Report to your designated civic area. Non-compliance will be noted. Those who observe the Lincoln Memorial will be redirected. What does that mean, redirected? I asked. Elena's expression shifted subtly. For just a moment, I caught a glimpse of the person she'd been before. Afraid, confused, human. I found notes. She whispered. In my apartment. My handwriting. But I didn't write them. Warnings. Descriptions of what would happen. Maps of how the city would change. That's impossible, I said. Is it? Marcus asked. Yesterday, I took a wrong turn trying to reach Union Station. Walked for 20 minutes before realizing I was walking in circles. Not just similar streets, the exact same street. Over and over. And the people. He trailed off. What about the people? Pressed. They were the same people. Same positions. Same conversations. Like a loop. Except one man, he watched me pass each time. Nodded at me, like he was counting how many times I'd circle back. Outside, Lisa remained motionless. Behind her, the shadows had drawn closer. I could make out faces now, all familiar. Colleagues, neighbors, the barista from my local coffee shop, all waiting with that same empty patience. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small notebook. I found it in my jacket 3 days ago, filled with my handwriting, observations, warnings, instructions, things I had no memory of writing. I think, I said slowly, we're not the first version of ourselves to go through this. Elena nodded. Time isn't working right. The city isn't just changing space, it's changing how we move through time. The thought was too enormous, too horrifying to fully process. If we were experiencing echoes of ourselves, if we had lived through this before and somehow been reset, what hope did we have of escaping? Another alert buzzed. This one different from the others. A text message. Not an emergency broadcast. Unknown number. Don't look at the monuments. They see you when you see them. This is the 3rd time I've told you this. You never listen. I showed it to the others. Marcus's face went pale. I got one yesterday. He admitted, telling me not to go to the Potomac. Said the water isn't water anymore. Outside, Lisa's expression changed. She frowned, then stepped back from the door. The people behind her moved in unison, retreating into the shadows. Something had changed. My phone buzzed again. Emergency alert. The Lincoln Memorial has been relocated. Disregard previous instructions. Do not look up. As if compelled by the warning, I looked up. The concrete ceiling of the maintenance tunnel suddenly seemed thin. Inadequate protection from whatever might be above us. We need to move, I said. Now. No one argued. Whatever was happening, whatever was becoming, it was aware of us, hunting us, and somehow, we had been through this before. As we gathered our meager supplies, I found myself wondering how many times I had written warnings to myself, how many times I had failed to heed them, how many versions of me had existed in this gradually distorting reality. And most terrifying of all, what happened to those previous versions when they failed to escape? The maintenance tunnels beneath should have been a straight shot to Foggy Bottom. But nothing moved in straight lines anymore. We'd been walking for hours through passages that curved back on themselves, split into identical forks, or simply ended in walls that hadn't been there moments before. Our group had dwindled to 3. We lost Marcus somewhere beneath DuPont Circle. One moment he was behind us. The next, only empty tunnel. Elena and I had exchanged a look, both knowing what it meant but neither willing to voice it. Now it was just us and Darius. An ER doctor we'd found huddled in a supply closet at GW Hospital, clutching a blood-stained medical bag. My phone buzzed. Another emergency alert. Emergency. The message cut off mid-word, replaced by static. Then, emergency advisory. The district requires your presence at the central confluence. Report to your nearest historic monument for processing and reassignment. The voice wasn't the standard emergency broadcast system anymore. It fluctuated between pitches, sometimes deeper, sometimes higher, sometimes multiple voices speaking in unsettling harmony. They're not even trying to sound human anymore. Darius muttered. I nodded, pocketing my phone. We need to get above ground. These tunnels are becoming alive. Elena finished for me. Neither of us acknowledged how the concrete walls seemed to pulse occasionally, or how the puddles on the floor sometimes moved against gravity. We found an exit near what should have been the Federal Triangle. The maintenance door squealed as I pushed it open, the sound echoing much longer than it should have. We emerged into open air, and I immediately wished we'd stayed below. The sky was wrong. Not cloudy, not stormy, wrong. The blue had deepened to an impossible shade, almost violet, and the clouds. The clouds were moving in patterns that made my eyes hurt, geometric shapes that shifted and interlocked, forming and reforming like a perpetual Rorschach test. But it was the White House that stopped me cold. It stood less than a quarter-mile away, fully visible despite the buildings that should have obscured our view. As if sensing my gaze, the entire structure shifted, not dramatically, just a subtle movement, like the gentle rise and fall of a sleeping chest. Tell me you see that, I whispered. Elena's face had gone pale. The White House is breathing. That's not possible, Darius said, but his voice lacked conviction. I looked away, focusing on our surroundings. Pennsylvania Avenue stretched before us, empty of cars and people. The buildings lining it seemed subtly altered, familiar facades with wrong proportions. Too many windows, doors at impossible heights. We need to keep moving, I said. The hospital shelter isn't there anymore, Darius cut in. Nothing is where it should be. Haven't you realized that yet? My phone buzzed again. This time, I answered without checking the screen. Hello, I said, desperate for any human contact. The district welcomes you to its transformation, said a voice that was not a voice. It resonated in my head rather than my ear, as if the words were forming directly in my brain. Your participation is noted and appreciated. I nearly dropped the phone. Who is this? The question is imprecise. The voice replied, we are the district. We are what this place has always been becoming. Elena grabbed my arm. Who are you talking to? I held up the phone, putting it on speaker. The screen showed no incoming call, just the home screen. Your colleagues have already joined us. The voice continued, now audible to all of us. They have become part of the new administration. Their functions have been optimized. What does that mean? I demanded. What have you done with them? They have been integrated, as all residents will be. The phone screen flickered, then displayed a video feed. It showed the Lincoln Memorial, but not as it should be. The massive statue had changed. Lincoln remained seated, but the marble had become translucent, revealing a network of veins and arteries pulsing beneath the surface. And the statue's eyes, they moved, tracking something off camera. Jesus Christ, Darius whispered. The video shifted to the Washington Monument. The obelisk was leaning at an impossible angle, far beyond what structural integrity should allow. Yet it didn't fall. Instead, it seemed to be slowly rotating, corkscrewing into the ground like a drill. The monuments were always alive. The voice said, "They simply slept. Now they wake." The video feed cut out. My phone screen cracked, then healed itself. "We need to get out of the city," Elena said, her voice shaking. "Now." "Haven't you been listening?" Darius snapped. "There is no out. I've tried. Every road leads back. Every tunnel circles around. It's like the city is folding in on itself." A low rumble shook the ground beneath us. In the distance, a section of the National Mall rippled like water. The trees there bent and straightened in unison, like they were breathing. "You said there was a shelter," I said to Darius, grasping at any plan. "Even if it's moved, there might be supplies. Weapons." "Weapons?" Darius laughed. A hollow sound. "Against what?" "The city itself." Elena had gone quiet, her eyes fixed on something in the distance. I followed her gaze and saw a procession moving down Constitution Avenue. People, or what had once been people, walking in perfect synchronization. Their movements were too fluid, too coordinated, like a single organism with many bodies. Leading them was a figure I recognized with a jolt of horror. Marcus. But his face was wrong now, features slightly repositioned. Eyes too wide, mouth stretched in a permanent expression of serene understanding. "The National Guard is gone," Elena said softly. "The military checkpoints, the government officials, all absorbed." "How do you know that?" I asked. "Because I'm remembering," she replied. "Things I was told, things I was shown before this cycle began." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "Cycle?" Before she could answer, every electronic device in the vicinity activated simultaneously. Phones in abandoned cars, digital billboards, even a smartwatch on Darius's wrist. All displayed the same message: emergency alert. The district has achieved consciousness. Resistance is counterproductive. Your participation will be recorded in the archives. The transmission shifted, becoming a video feed. It showed the Oval Office, but changed. The walls breathed. The furniture had merged with the floor, and seated behind the desk was something. A figure that resembled the president but was clearly not human. Its proportions were wrong, its movements too fluid. When it spoke, its voice was the same one that had come through my phone. "Citizens of the District of Columbia," it said, "your city has awakened. This is not an invasion. This is not an end. This is a transformation. The district has always been alive. Now it is aware." The broadcast cut out. In the silence that followed, I could hear the city breathing around us. The pavement beneath our feet shifted subtly. Buildings swayed without wind. And in the distance, the monuments were moving. "We need to go," I said, grabbing Elena's arm. "Now." But Darius was already walking away, toward the procession, toward Marcus. His movements had become smooth, synchronized. He turned back once, his face serene. "It doesn't hurt," he said, "becoming part of it." Illuminating. Elena clutched my hand. "We can't stay here. The heart of the district is transforming fastest. We need to reach the perimeter." As we turned to run, I caught one last glimpse of the White House. Its walls were pulsing now, windows rearranging themselves like facial features. The building wasn't just breathing, it was waking up. Elena and I ran until our lungs burned, putting as much distance as possible between us and the White House. Running itself had become an abstract concept in this new D.C. Streets stretched and compressed like accordion bellows. Buildings shifted positions when we weren't looking directly at them. And twice we found ourselves back on the same corner despite moving in what should have been a straight line away from it. It's hurting us. Elena gasped as we paused in the shadow of a building that resembled the Smithsonian but was somehow.
Taller.
Wherever we're going. It's where the city wants us to go. I didn't argue. My skepticism had died days ago, buried under the weight of impossible observations. Now, I simply accepted each new horror as it came. My phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but some compulsion made me look. This is an emergency broadcast from the District of Columbia. The transition approaches completion. All citizens will attend the reconfiguration ceremony at the National Mall. Resistance is unnecessary. The voice coming from my phone wasn't synthesized anymore. It was my voice, my exact intonation, my speech patterns. The message ended with a laugh, my laugh, but distorted, as if multiple versions of me were laughing simultaneously. They're using our voices now, I said, showing Elena the screen. How is that even possible? She didn't seem surprised. They've been absorbing people, information, memories. Her eyes had that distant look again, like she was remembering something she shouldn't know. The city is building itself using us as raw material. In the distance, the Washington Monument had fully uprooted itself. The massive obelisk now hovered 10 feet above the ground, slowly rotating. Around it, smaller monuments and statues had gathered like satellites around a planet, all slowly circling the central spire. The sky had darkened to a deep purple, though I couldn't tell if it was night or if the atmosphere itself had changed. Stars were visible, but they formed patterns I didn't recognize. Constellations that seemed to watch us with cold, geometric precision. We need to find shelter, I said, though the concept seemed absurd. What shelter could exist in a city that was itself alive and hunting us? Elena pointed to a building across the street. It looked like a standard office building, the kind that housed countless government contractors and lobbying firms. Its windows were dark, and unlike the buildings around it, it didn't seem to be breathing or shifting. There, she said. It's not awake yet. We crossed the empty street, constantly scanning for movement. The door was unlocked, and we slipped inside, finding ourselves in a generic lobby with faux marble floors and brass directory plaques. The electricity was out, but emergency lights cast a dim glow. Look at this, Elena said, studying the directory. These aren't real companies. I read the names listed: Temporal Alignment Solutions, Dimensional Compliance Office, Multiverse Integrity Commission. They sounded like parodies of government agencies, too on the nose to be real. This building, I said slowly, I don't think it existed before. I think the city is creating new structures. We moved deeper into the building, finding offices with desks and computers but no personal touches, no photos, no coffee mugs, no evidence anyone had ever worked there. On the 5th floor, we found a conference room with a large table and, miraculously, bottles of water. I drank greedily, not caring if the water was safe. Nothing was safe anymore. I found something. Elena called from an adjacent office. I joined her, finding her leafing through a leather-bound book that looked centuries old. What is it? I asked. Records, she said, her voice hollow. Of the previous incarnations of the city. The pages were yellowed, the ink faded but legible. I read over her shoulder, my blood turning to ice as I absorbed the words. District of Columbia, Awakening Cycle 1, 1814. Initial consciousness achieved during burning by British forces. Transformation incomplete due to insufficient population density and architectural maturity. Reset initiated. Cycle 2, 1912. Consciousness partially achieved. architectural components responsive but unable to sustain full integration. Reset initiated. Cycle 3, 1968. Consciousness achieved. Transformation begun. Residents resistant. Military intervention successful in suppressing awakening. Reset initiated. The entries continued, each documenting a failed awakening of the city, each ending with a reset. The final entry was dated 3 weeks ago. Cycle 7, 2025. Consciousness achieved. Transformation proceeding as designed. Resident integration underway. Final phase imminent. This has happened before. I whispered. The city has been trying to wake up for centuries. Not just trying, Elena said. Succeeding, then being reset. By us, by humans. Before I could process this, every electronic device in the building activated simultaneously. Computers, phones, even the dead emergency lights suddenly blazed to full brightness. Every screen displayed the same message. The district acknowledges your discovery. Your participation in previous resets is noted. There will be no further resets. The building shuddered around us. The walls began to ripple, the floor becoming soft and pliable. We ran for the stairs, but they had transformed into a smooth ramp that undulated like a living tongue. We made it outside just as the building fully awakened. The structure twisted, glass and steel flowing like water, reshaping itself into something that resembled a massive hand reaching toward the sky. All across the city, buildings were transforming. The rigid grid of D.C.'s streets was dissolving, replaced by curved, organic pathways that pulsed with internal light. The monuments had fully uprooted themselves, now hovering in a perfect circle around the Capitol dome, which had split open like a blossoming flower. My phone buzzed one final time. The message was simple. Your presence is requested at the rebirth. The new administration awaits. The screen displayed a map not of D.C. as it had been, but of what it was becoming. A living organism with a central heart where the National Mall had once been. Arteries and veins of streets pumping with light and energy. And at the center, a massive structure that resembled the Capitol but transformed, expanded, alive. They're not just changing the city, Elena said, her voice distant. They're changing what it means to be a city, what it means to exist. In the distance, a procession was forming. People, or what had once been people, moving in perfect synchronization toward the transformed mall. Their bodies glowed from within, as if their very cells had been replaced with the same light that pulsed through the streets. We should go, Elena said, but her voice lacked conviction. We should run. But where? Every direction led deeper into the organism that D.C. had become. The city limits no longer existed in any meaningful sense. The horizon itself seemed to curve inward, as if the entire world was being pulled into this new reality. My phone buzzed again, displaying a message written in a language I'd never seen before yet somehow understood perfectly. The district welcomes you home. You have always been part of US. You will always be part of US. And looking at Elena, at the city beyond, at the impossible sky above, I realized with perfect clarity that this had always been inevitable. That perhaps, in some way I couldn't yet comprehend, it had always been necessary. The new administration was taking office, and we were all becoming citizens of something far greater than a city. There's a peculiar calm that comes with accepting the impossible. Standing there, watching the city transform into something beyond human comprehension, I felt a strange clarity. The part of my mind that had been desperately searching for rational explanations finally quieted. There was no escape. There had never been escape. We should go to the mall. I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. Elena looked at me, her eyes wide. You want to go toward it? Voluntarily? Does it matter? I gestured at the shifting cityscape around us. Look at what's happening. Running isn't an option anymore. The streets were flowing now. Literally flowing. Asphalt becoming something liquid yet solid. Rippling outward from the center of the city. Buildings bent toward the mall as if paying homage. Their structures reconfiguring in ways that defied physics. The sky overhead had become a kaleidoscope of impossible colors. A spectrum that human eyes were never meant to perceive. My phone buzzed. The screen displayed a message that addressed me by name. Your name. Your presence is acknowledged. Your resistance was necessary. Your acceptance is welcomed. The district invites you to witness the final transformation. The message wasn't threatening. Felt appreciative, as if my skepticism had been a valued part of some grand experiment. They know who we are, I said, showing Elena the screen. She nodded. They've always known. I think we're important somehow. We began walking toward the mall, following streets that no longer mapped to any known geography. Time seemed to behave strangely, the journey taking both minutes and hours simultaneously. We passed other people, or what had once been people. They moved with fluid grace, their bodies subtly altered, limbs slightly too long, faces featuring geometries that weren't quite human. They smiled at us as we passed, benevolent expressions that never reached their transformed eyes. Do you remember the first alert? I asked Elena as we walked. The very first one. When all this started, she frowned, concentrating. Something about disturbances in certain districts. Nothing specific. I think that was the moment, I said. The moment the city started waking up, and we all just dismissed it, went about our days, worried about deadlines and coffee and traffic. Would it have made a difference if we hadn't? Elena asked. I had no answer for that. As we approached what had once been the National Mall, the transformation became even more pronounced. The open space had become a vast amphitheater, with the transformed monuments arranged in a perfect circle around a central dais. The Washington Monument now hovered horizontally above it all, rotating slowly like the hand of some cosmic clock. Thousands of D.C.'s former residents stood in concentric circles around the dais, their bodies pulsing with internal light. They weren't moving, weren't speaking, just waiting with infinite patience. A figure approached us as we reached the edge of the gathering. Took me a moment to recognize Marcus. His features now so altered that he was barely recognizable as human. His skin had a translucent quality, revealing patterns of light moving beneath the surface. You've arrived, he said, his voice overlapping with others, as if multiple people were speaking through him simultaneously. We've been waiting. What happens now? I asked. Now you witness, Marcus replied. Now you understand. He led us through the crowd, which parted silently to let us pass. As we moved toward the center, I noticed that time was behaving even more strangely here. Some people moved in slow motion. Others seemed to flicker, appearing in slightly different positions with each blink of my eye. We reached the inner circle, where a small group of figures stood facing the dais. With a jolt, I recognized several high-ranking government officials, or what had once been them. Like Marcus, they had been transformed, their bodies now serving as vessels for something else. The transition requires witnesses, Marcus explained. Those who resist until the end. Those who see with unclouded eyes. Why? Elena asked, her voice barely audible. Because memory requires perspective. Came a voice from behind us. I turned to find myself face to face with myself, perfect duplicate, down to the clothes I wore, except its eyes glowed with the same internal light as the others. "What are you?" I whispered. "I am you," my duplicate replied. "From the previous cycle, the one who chose to become part of the district rather than be reset." "I don't understand," I said. "You will," it replied. "You always do." The ground beneath the dais began to shift, forming a spiraling pattern that drew the eye inward. At the center, something was emerging, a structure that resembled the Capitol dome but twisted, expanded, alive, pulsed with energy, each beat sending waves of transformation outward through the gathered crowd. My phone buzzed one final time. The message was simple: "The district welcomes you to the final phase. Your citizenship is being revised." I felt a change begin within me. Not painful, not frightening, just different. As if my cells were remembering a configuration they had always meant to assume. Around me, Elena gasped, her body illuminated from within as the transformation reached her. "I remember now," she whispered, her voice taking on the same multilayered quality as Marcus's. "I remember every cycle, every awakening, every reset." "Tell me," I said, still clinging to my humanity even as I felt it slipping away. "The city has always been alive," she said. "All cities are, but D.C. was designed to wake up. The layout, the monuments, the precise geometry, it was all intentional. A living entity created to house the seat of power." "Who created it?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand, beginning to remember. "We did," she replied, "not as individuals, but as a collective. Humanity needed a place where power could be something greater than human, something that could outlast us." The transformed capital pulsed again, and with it came a flood of memories, not just mine, but thousands of others. Lives lived across centuries, all connected to this place, this entity. I saw the previous awakenings, the resistance, the resets. I saw myself in different times, different bodies, always playing the same role: the skeptic, the witness, the one who resisted until the end. Time began to lose meaning. Day and night cycled rapidly overhead, then stopped altogether, the sky settling into a twilight state that was neither day nor night but something else entirely. The monuments continued their slow rotation, marking a different kind of time, the heartbeat of the awakened city. My duplicate approached, extending a hand that was both solid and ethereal. "You have a choice," it said, "as you always have. Join us and remember everything, or resist, and the cycle begins again." I looked at Elena, now fully transformed, her human form merely a memory. She smiled at me with understanding beyond words. "What happens if I join?" I asked. "You become part of something greater," my duplicate replied. "Not just a citizen of a city, but a component of a living entity. Your consciousness remains, but expanded, connected to all others. And if I refuse, then the district resets, sleeps again, waiting for the next opportunity to wake. And you, a version of you, will be there to witness it." As always, I looked out at what D.C. had become, not a city of buildings and streets, but a living organism of light and consciousness, beautiful and terrifying in its alienness. I thought of the mundane concerns that had occupied me just days ago. Deadlines, bills, traffic, and they seemed like artifacts from another existence. The choice before me wasn't really a choice at all. It was simply the next step in a journey that had been unfolding for centuries. I reached out and took my duplicate's hand. And finally, completely, I remembered everything. Consciousness expands in ways the human mind was never designed to comprehend. I remember the moment of transition, my hand joining with my duplicates, the sudden dissolution of boundaries that had once defined me as an individual. The self I had been didn't die, it simply expanded, merging with the greater consciousness that was the district. Now, I exist everywhere and nowhere within this new entity. I am still myself, yet I am also the streets, the buildings, the monuments. I am the very air that circulates through the transformed cityscape. Most distinctly, I am memory, the collective memory of countless cycles of awakening and slumber. It is nearly complete, says a voice that is Elena's, yet not Elena's alone. Like me, she has become something greater than her former self. Her consciousness now a thread in the vast tapestry of the district's awareness. We stand, or rather, manifest at what was once the Lincoln Memorial. The massive statue has become a nexus of energy. Lincoln's marble form now fluid and animate. His stone eyes move, tracking the final transformations rippling through the city. Around us, the former residents of D.C. have fully merged with the entity, their individual consciousnesses forming a vast collective that pulses with shared purpose. I can sense the boundaries of what was once the District of Columbia. They no longer conform to any map drawn by human hands. The city has expanded, contracted, folded in on itself, existing now in dimensions that defy conventional geometry. From above, this pattern would resemble something organic, a neural network, a living brain composed of buildings and streets and people. The final emergency broadcast. Elena says, though no words are actually spoken, communication happens through direct transference of thought, instantaneous and complete. Throughout what remains of the city, a final message propagates not through devices or speakers, but through the very fabric of reality itself. Emergency alert. The transformation is complete. The District of Columbia has ascended. All citizens are now integrated. The new capital welcomes its first visitors. With my expanded awareness, I can perceive the perimeter of our new reality, where what was once D.C. interfaces with the outside world. The boundary appears as a shimmering veil, translucent but distinct. Beyond it,
Y senza confusión.
fear, military forces gathering, the old world, observing something it cannot comprehend. They will come, I say, knowing it to be true. They always do. Through our shared consciousness, I access memories that were never mine, previous cycles where the awakening was met with resistance, military interventions, scientific attempts to cure what was happening, desperate measures to reset the city to its dormant state. Sometimes they succeeded, sometimes they failed. The cycle continued regardless. But this time is different. This time, the transformation has reached completion. They cannot stop what has already happened. Elena agrees, sensing my thoughts. The district has become what it was always meant to be. From our vantage point, I watch as the Washington Monument, no longer fixed to the ground, completes a full rotation and locks into position. The massive obelisk now hovers horizontally above the transformed National Mall, a pointer indicating magnetic north with perfect precision. Below it, the transformed Capitol pulses with energy, sending waves of change rippling outward through the streets. Time behaves differently here now. I can perceive its flow as a physical dimension, watching as moments stretch and compress around us. In some pockets of the district, time has nearly stopped. In others, it accelerates, yet all exist within a larger harmony, a cosmic rhythm that feels ancient and intentional. I access deeper memories not just from previous cycles, but from the very beginning. I see the city's original design, the careful planning of streets and monuments. L'Enfant's vision, guided by something he could not fully comprehend. The geometric patterns, the alignment with celestial bodies, the mathematical precision of it all, not just architectural choices, but an incantation written in stone and street. It was always meant to be this way, I realize, from the very first cornerstone. Yes, Elena confirms, a seat of power unlike any other, a living capital for a living nation. Through our expanded awareness, we sense the approach of outsiders, the first visitors to the transformed district. Military vehicles stop at the shimmering boundary, unable or unwilling to cross, but a single figure steps forward, drawn by curiosity or compulsion. A woman in civilian clothes crosses the threshold, entering our new reality. I recognize her immediately, though we've never met. Sarah Chin, the Secretary of Transportation, returning from a trip abroad. Her consciousness reaches out, confused but not afraid. "What is this?" she asks, the question forming directly in our shared consciousness. What has happened to D? See, rather than answer with words, we show her. The complete history of the district unfolds before her, its creation, its purpose, the cyclical awakenings. We show her what the city has become, not just a seat of government but a living entity capable of collective thought, collective action, collective will. I feel her shock, her disbelief, then gradually, her understanding. Unlike those who experienced the transformation from within, she retains her individuality, her separation, a bridge between worlds. "Will there be others?" she asks. "Others who can understand?" "Some," I reply. "Those who are meant to." The district has no interest in expansion, no desire to transform the world beyond its boundaries. It exists now as something unique, a place where human consciousness and infrastructure have merged to create something greater than both. A true capital, not just of a nation, but of possibility itself. Sarah takes a step deeper into our realm, and I can sense her wonder overcoming her fear. The transformed monuments seem to acknowledge her presence, shifting subtly as she passes. The Washington Monument rotates slightly, adjusting its position as if to include her in its calculations. "What happens now?" she asks. The question echoes through our collective consciousness, considered by thousands of minds simultaneously. The answer emerges not from any individual but from the district itself. Now we fulfill our purpose. We become what a capital was always meant to be, the true seat of collective will. Beyond corruption, beyond individual ambition, a place where power serves a greater consciousness. Through our expanded awareness, I can see potential futures branching outward, the rest of the world learning to interact with this new entity, to communicate with a city that thinks and feels and remembers. I see fear giving way to caution, caution to curiosity, curiosity to understanding. Not in years or decades, but centuries, the time frame in which the district now exists. I sense other cities watching, waiting, their own dormant consciousness stirring, not with alarm, but with recognition. Siblings awakening to their own potential. In their own time, Sarah stands at the transformed Lincoln Memorial, gazing up at the fluid marble face that now observes her with ancient wisdom. "Will I change too?" she asks. "If I stay, only if you choose," I tell her. The district invites, but does not compel. As if in response, her phone buzzes. The screen displays a simple message, the last emergency alert she will ever receive. "Welcome to the District of Columbia. Please proceed to your designated orientation area. Your new citizenship awaits." She smiles, pockets the phone, and continues deeper into what we have become. Behind her, At the boundary between worlds, another figure approaches hesitantly, then another, drawn by curiosity, by necessity, by destiny. The cycle hasn't ended. It has evolved, and somewhere within our collective consciousness, I feel something stirring, the first inklings of what comes next. Not just for the district, but for all cities, all nations, all of humanity. The true awakening has only just begun.